5 spine-chilling videos exposing hidden elementals. Terrifying forces unveiled. The screen flickered ominously as the title blared to life. Heart racing, Sarah leaned closer, utterly captivated. Hidden elementals? Terrifying forces? She glanced around her quiet home in Maplewood, her breath hitching, and a chill rolled down her spine. What could those possibly be? The suburban haven she'd called home suddenly seemed like it harbored a sinister secret. She shook off the creeping dread, but the content was impossible to ignore. Stories of unsettling whispers, shadows darting between the trees, and malevolent forces hidden among their manicured lawns. Late-night paranoia seeped in, and Sarah couldn't help but scroll deeper. Videos flickered with promises of revealing ancient truths. Each clip recounted terrifying sightings, people who claimed to see twisted figures reminiscent of her children's artwork lurking in the woods. A gnawing fear rose in her gut. What if the strange noises she'd been hearing were real? A faint whisper echoed through the walls. She glanced at the clock. 1:30 a.m. Shadows loomed in the corners where the light barely reached. Panic bubbled under her skin. Suddenly, Matt's cheerful giggle shattered her anxious thoughts. She rushed to peek at him, relieved to find him engrossed in crayon drawings on the living room floor. But as she squinted at his sketches, her stomach twisted. The figures weren't of happy cartoons, not anymore. Twisted trees with claw-like branches reached towards a swirling sky that seemed alive. What had once been innocent scribbles now felt ominous. Something was wrong, but who would believe her? The atmosphere in her house thickened like fog as midnight approached. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows, and caught the attention of Emily, who whispered nervously from her room. But what sent shivers down Sarah's spine were the candor and judgment in her neighbors' eyes whenever they saw her. Gazes that wouldn't meet hers grew sharper, filled with suspicion and cool unease, as if they sensed a truth that she had yet to unveil. That evening, Sarah confided in her best friend over the phone. "I've been hearing things, Jenna. Strange whispers in the night. It's almost as if something is watching us." A long pause resonated in the silence before Jenna replied, her voice a fragile whisper. "Sometimes it's better to let the past remain buried." The cryptic warning set Sarah's heart racing again. What hidden truths lay within the history of Maplewood? Desperate for answers, Sarah dove into research and discovered strange folklore surrounding the land, a place where ancient spirits were once worshipped, but turned vengeful due to human transgressions. Could that be what her children were drawing? When a brewing storm rolled in, all hell broke loose. Rain lashed against the house, as thunder cracked ominously. Whispers evolved into anguished wails. Shadows twisted and writhed, mirrors of Matt's nightmarish artistry. It was real. With her heart pounding like a drum against her ribcage, Sarah bolted outside, determined to confront her neighbors about the hidden elementals. They fell silent, expressions cold and stony, leaving Sarah's skin crawling with dread. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. Standing at the edge of her dimly lit yard, she came to a harrowing realization. The malevolent force wasn't lurking deep in the woods, but thrived within the very community she depended on. Just then, an unnatural howl sliced through the night, followed by the kaleidoscope of shadows twisting at the corner of her vision. What else was waiting to break free? With her children at risk, she knew the true horror had only just begun. The howl echoed again, piercing the night, and Sarah's heart raced faster. She backed away slowly, scanning the darkened houses of her neighborhood. Every light was dimmed, every window a darkened eye watching her. Her pulse hammered in her ears, drowning out the whispers that had twisted into desperate cries just a moment ago. Then she spotted a figure at the end of the street, cloaked in shadows. It was the neighbor, Jack, the man who had often given her uneasy advice about keeping the kids close. Something about him felt off, like a spider hiding just beneath the surface of a web. He stood rooted, unmoving, and for a second, the power of the storm seemed to die around them. Silence fell so deeply that it choked her. "Sarah," he called, his voice low and gravelly, as if he were forcing the words out through a tight throat. "You shouldn't be out here." She fought the urge to scream at him. "I know what you all are hiding. I can hear them." Her voice shook, but the anger pushed her forward. "What is going on here?" Jack's withered face twisted into a grimace, eyes darting down the street as if expecting something to come slinking out of the night's grasp. "You have to leave," he warned, urgency spilling over the edges of his calm facade. "They're restless. You can't awaken what is asleep." "Awaken what?" she pressed, fury and fear twisting inside her. The stories, the warnings from Jenna, and even the people in town flashed through her mind in a chaotic swarm. What past had she tangled with unknowingly? Suddenly, a deafening crash echoed from the woods. The air shifted with fury, the winds picked up, swirling leaves into a frenzied dance. The smell of salt and damp earth roared in her lungs. "Get inside. Now!" Jack shouted, finally stepping forward, reaching for her arm. The second his fingers grazed her skin, a jolt shot through her. Clay cold and jagged like a shard of ice, his grip was unnaturally strong. With a sharp jerk, she pulled free. Could she trust him? In that moment, she realized how frail her world had become. Each step back felt like a descent into a darkness she didn't understand. She turned, dashing toward her home as the shadows writhed hungrily around her. As Sarah fumbled with the door, the night burst open behind her. Unseen entities thrummed with a sinister energy, echoing her children as drawings, the distorted trees, the attacking branches, the swirling sky. A monstrous wind exploded from the forest, nearly knocking her off her feet. Fumbling, she stumbled inside and slammed the door shut. Her breath hitched, panic slashing through her veins. Matt and Emily. They were vulnerable. Just then, a heavy knock resounded against the door, as if something with weight and intent was ready to break through. The whispers morphed into a roar, shaking the very walls of her home. She rushed to the living room, eyes wide. Matt and Emily were still asleep, their small forms wrapped under a pile of blankets. Thank God. But something else pulled her attention, a movement in the corner. A shadow danced just beyond where the light met the darkness. With her heart pounding, she stepped closer, her instincts screaming for her to run away. As her trembling hand reached for the lamp, she caught sight of a figure reflected in the darkened glass of the window. It wasn't her children's drawings. This was real. She staggered back, breath hitching, staring wide-eyed at the haunting outline of a creature, skull-like features barely illuminated by the lightning's flash. In that instant, reality bent, and the air thickened with malice. She realized the whispers weren't merely sounds. They were beckoning her, urging her not to resist. "Mommy!" A tiny voice broke through the cacophony. Matt stood at the edge of the living room. Fear plastered his innocent face, eyes wide with confusion. Suddenly, all the warmth in Sarah's heart froze, and horror clung to her throat. By waking what had been buried, was she unwillingly pulling her children into a darkness much greater than her own? As she stepped toward him, ready to shield him, another howl rang out from the woods, a promise of chaos about to break loose. Will she uncover the truth before it's too late? "Mommy!" Matt's small voice echoed like a crack in the darkness, but it paled next to the howl that ripped through the night, again closer, angrier. "Matt, stay close!" Sarah shouted, her voice a raw whisper barely capable of containing her terror. She turned towards the window, trembling, the creature still lurking just beyond her sight. "Is it the monster, Mommy?" His voice quivered. "What monster? There's no monster." The words tumbled out, desperation painting a brave face on her fear. But denial fell flat, powerless against the reality pressing in around them. She knew better than to give in to the wild fantasies of a child. She needed to protect him. In a heartbeat, she crossed the room, gathering Matt into her arms. His weight felt like a comforting anchor in the storm of dread swirling in her mind. She glanced over her shoulder toward the door, heart thundering. Suddenly, the shadows shifted, pooling together like ink spreading on canvas. The creature's whisper brushed against her ears, a chilling breeze that cut through the air, sending goosebumps rippling across her skin. It coiled around her senses, almost soothing, like a lullaby sung in a language long forgotten. "Mommy, it's cold." Matt's whisper pricked at her heart. "Let us get you a blanket," she said, though her feet felt frozen to the floor. She could still feel the pull of shadows drawing her closer to the window, closer to the nightmare just out of her view. "Mommy, don't go!" he cried, his grip tightening around her neck. The howling wind surged again, battering the walls, rattling the windows like angry fists. Sarah darted toward the closet, panic-fueled adrenaline guiding her steps. The fabric felt like a protection she could grasp, something real in the ever-thickening shadows. She wrapped a blanket tightly around Matt, clutching him to her chest. "Emily." Matt's voice quivered again, every syllable weighted with dread. "Emily is fine, sweetheart. She is sleeping," Sarah reassured, but another howl ripped through the air, a sound of terrible anguish that forked her resolve. Suddenly, the doorknob trembled violently, splinters flying as whatever was outside banged against the entrance. The door wasn't going to hold much longer. Sarah's head swam with thoughts of running, hiding somewhere safe, but she didn't know where that was anymore. "Jack," she remembered. His warning echoed in her mind like a haunting chant. We should have listened. With an inexplicable urgency, she abandoned the door, racing toward the back window. "We need to escape." She yanked up the window and let the night air flood in, bracing against the chill that screamed of danger. "Where are we going?" The desperation in Matt's voice struck her like a knife. "We'll find your sister," she breathed, eyes darting in the dim light, searching for any sign, any hope. The thunder rumbled once again, and a flash of lightning illuminated a figure just for a heartbeat. It was monstrous, an amalgamation of shadow and wrath, its eyes glowing in the dark like embers waiting to swallow her whole. "Mommy! Matt, stay inside!" She shouted over the rising chaos, but the window was bolted with shadows now, joining the frantic murmurs of temptation swirling in her ears. She steeled herself. "We're getting Emily." Without thinking, Sarah vaulted out of the window, the depths of the night swallowing her. She landed with a thud, her legs nearly buckling beneath her, but the sound was drowned by the cacophony of howls echoing through the woods, answering the darkness that clawed at her heart. "Run! Get to the trees!" A flash of white struck her vision. Emily, alone and standing at the edge of the yard, was wrapped in an eerie glow that beckoned her closer. But shadows danced hungrily around the little girl, waiting to ensnare her in their grip. "Emily!" Sarah's voice was raw, laced with panic. The creature roared, shaking the very ground beneath her. "Mommy!" But as Sarah sprinted toward her, desperation clawing at her throat, she couldn't shake Jack's words from her mind. "You can't awaken what is asleep." Could she reach her daughter before the darkness consumed them all? The pull of the shadows grew stronger, a malevolent power determined to keep them apart, as another dreadful howl resonated through the night, a warning, a promise. Her heart thundered in her chest. In moments like these, could love break through the onslaught of terror, or would it drown beneath their hidden fears? Sarah sprinted forward, knowing full well there was no turning back. But what if she was already too late? The ground trembled with urgency beneath Sarah's feet as she pushed herself toward Emily, the weight of her dread compelling every step. The shadows twisted, curling around her ankles like sinister serpents, trying to pull her back, to enforce their hungry grip. "Emily, don't move!" she shouted, desperation coloring her tone as she plowed through the crunching leaves and damp earth. The air thickened with fear, a palpable force that clawed at Sarah's throat, making it hard to breathe. "Mommy!" Emily's voice was a fragile whisper against the howling wind. "I'm scared." Each syllable pierced Sarah's heart deeper. Emily's small figure shimmered like a beacon in the night, yet the closer Sarah got, the darker the shadows surrounding her daughter became. It was paralyzing, a force against which she felt powerless. "Stay there, sweetie, I'm coming." Sarah stumbled, fighting against the unseen hand that seemed intent on snatching her daughter away. But then, a massive shadow, a silhouette larger than any human should be, surged forward from the woods, rushing toward Emily. "Get back!" Sarah screamed, energy surging through her veins like wildfire. She hurled herself forward, feet pounding against the terror rising in her throat. Emily stood frozen, entranced by the glowing figure that flared menacingly. The creature lunged, its form rippling between the known and unknown. Sarah saw a maw opening wide, teeth glistening, ready to consume all that it encountered. "No!" The word escaped her lips, heavy with urgency and fear. She threw herself into a sprint, reaching for her daughter. Matt's cries faded into the background, a distant echo swallowed by the frantic beating of Sarah's heart. Everything narrowed to a singular focus: Emily. She reached her child just as the creature's shadow reached her. "Hold on!" Sarah yanked Emily toward her, wrapping her arms around her daughter. Their bodies collided with a force that sent a jolt of adrenaline through them both, and with it came a fleeting moment of hope. But the shadows twisted and writhed, swirling around them like an angry storm, suffocating and relentless. "Mommy, it's too dark," Emily whimpered, the terror in her voice shaking Sarah to the core. She could feel the shadows closing in, could sense the creature's presence hovering just out of reach, but almost within earshot. "I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you." Sarah's voice cracked, determination battling her rising panic. She stumbled backward, pulling Emily away from the growing dark, but the looming creature blocked their path toward safety. Without warning, it lunged forward, shadows coiling around its form. The howl, so powerful and feral, resonated through the night air, vibrating in Sarah's bones. It was a sound of world-ending despair, the kind that threatens to tear everything apart. A flicker of memory broke through the chaos, Jack's final warning ringing in her ears like a drumbeat. What asleep must not awaken, but here it was, awakened. Here, right on the verge of obliterating everything. The creature's eyes, two blazing infernos of malice, locked onto Sarah. She felt its intent, deep and chilling, slicing through her resolve. It found her weakness, the cracks in her facade, exploiting them as tentacles of shadow reached out menacingly. "Run!" Back to the house. Sarah pushed Emily towards safety, frantically scanning for an escape. "Mommy!" Emily protested, ready to stand her ground. "Just go!" Sarah's scream was primal, laced with the raw intensity of a mother's love. But in that moment, the ground split beneath them, a bottomless void gaping open, lightning illuminating the darkness. "Mommy!" In an instant, the world tilted. Sarah grabbed Emily's hand, holding tight, feeling the tug of shadows wanting to drag them into the abyss. Heart racing, she prepared to leap, the edge of the void looming closer, terrifying. Could love prevail against the void? Would they fall, or could they leap into the safety of unknowing fate? Just as they leapt, the howl rose to an earth-shattering crescendo, morphing into an impossible, chilling laugh that, echoed long after they descended into darkness. The ground trembled, and shadows promised what was left behind could not escape the awakening. Did the creature's laugh follow, or was it something darker still? Sarah held on to that question as the darkness closed in, threatening to erase everything she held dear. Falling through the darkness felt endless. Time warped, stretching between panic and terror as Sarah clutched Emily tightly. The laughter echoed in her mind, a cruel reminder that they weren't safe. Then, with a violent jolt, they landed hard. The impact knocked the breath from Sarah's lungs. She gasped for air, heart pounding like a drum in her ears. The shadows seemed to recede, but the darkness still loomed, wrapping around them like an unwanted embrace. "Mommy, where are we?" Emily's soft voice trembled, uncertainty thickening the air around them. Sarah blinked hard, attempting to adjust to the dim surroundings. They stood in a clearing, illuminated faintly by an eerie silvery glow that flickered like dying starlight. Surrounding them were twisted trees, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, grasping and clutching at nothing. "It's okay," Sarah whispered, though doubt wormed its way into her mind. "We just need to find a way to." A rustling in the underbrush made her freeze. Fear constricted her throat as she stared into the murky shadows, muscles coiled tight. "Mommy, I hear it," Emily whispered, eyes wide, reflecting the shimmering light with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "I know, baby. Just stay close." Sarah fought against the cold sweat dampening her back. She turned slowly, scanning for the source of the sound. The rustling grew louder, a low, guttural growl resonated from the darkness that sent a chill racing down her spine. What is it?" Emily's voice cracked, a tremor on the edge of hysteria. "Shoo. We don't know what it is." Sarah crouched, pulling Emily down behind a large, gnarled root that jutted from the ground. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, yet her body was locked in place. The shadows moved. Something emerged, a figure coalescing from the darkness, formless and massive. It glided closer, its presence distorting the air. Sarah's heart raced as she noticed the silent glimmer of its eyes, bright pinpoints that cut through the veil of night, fixated on their hiding spot. "Don't move," Sarah murmured, squeezing Emily's hand tightly. But the comfort she hoped to provide was crushed by overpowering fear. The growl deepened, vibrating through the ground like thunder. As the shadowed figure drew closer, it morphed, shifting shapes, contorted into grotesque humanoid forms masked by darkness. Each silhouette seemed to scream with an urgency that sliced through the stillness. What had they awakened? Suddenly, a flash of white tore through the shadows, and a blinding light enveloped them both. Sarah shielded Emily's eyes, but the brilliance pierced through, flooding the clearing. "Run!" she screamed, adrenaline surging anew as she leaped to her feet, tugging Emily behind her. With no sense of direction, they bolted, the light guiding their frantic escape. Behind them, the shadows roared, a cacophony of rage that sent shivers through their very souls. Each step felt like a countdown to the inevitable, and urgency that begged them to move faster. Through the clearing, they twisted and turned, determined to outrun the monstrosities that sought them. "Mommy, I can't," Emily wheezed, fear gripping her tiny body. "Hold on. Just a bit further," Sarah urged, heart racing, limbs fighting against exhaustion. They burst out of the clearing and onto a path flanked by thick, dark trees, their bark knotted and twisted, like a long-forgotten grave. As they ran, the shadows clawed at their heels, laughter now intermingled with guttural roars of anger, haunting reminders of the creature seeking its prey. But as she looked ahead, something caught Sarah's eye, a glimmer of light breaking through the churning darkness. Salvation? Or more danger disguised in luring rays? With every ounce of her strength, she drove forward, pulling Emily with her. Just beyond the light lay a thicket, branches clawing at them like the shadows chasing them. "Mommy, please don't let it get us." Emily cried, raw fear flooding her voice. The light beckoned them, but who could they trust in a world of shadows? What if we're running toward our doom? Sarah wondered, heart pounding, caught between hope and despair. Would trusting the light mean finding safety, or facing something far more sinister? They barreled toward the unknown, fear propelling them forward, doubt clawing at their heels. What awaited them on the other side? As they approached, the light pulsed, and for the briefest moment, everything stopped. Shadows receded, pooling away as they stepped closer. But the closer they got, the more sinister the brightness became. And then it flickered. Would it lead to salvation? Or an even darker fate? The moment Sarah and Emily stepped closer to the flickering light, the air became thick, charged with an electric tension. The ground beneath their feet seemed to vibrate with a pulse of its own, as if it was alive, breathing in sync with the shadows that lurked at the edges of their vision. "Mommy, I feel funny," Emily whined, scrunching her nose as she gripped her mother's hand tighter. "I know. Just keep holding on." Sarah's voice trembled, each word an effort as fear twisted her stomach into knots. The light flickered, casting strange shapes on the ground that danced in a chaotic rhythm. It felt inviting yet ominous, like a siren's call. A sudden hiss cut through the silence, and dread washed over her. Sarah turned sharply, heart racing. The shadows hadn't vanished. They lurked closer now, shifting like liquid nightmares. She could sense their hunger, their anticipation. They were waiting for her to falter. "Run!" she shouted again, feeling the weight of desperation pressing down on her. They surged forward, barreling into the light, but as they crossed the threshold, it dimmed. Shimmering sparks erupted, splintering in all directions like firecrackers. "Mommy!" Emily screamed, as the dazzling light seemed to shatter around them, leaving trails of darkness creeping closer, but they were in. Sarah blinked, scanning their new surroundings. They stood in a strange world, a hall of mirrors reflecting distorted images of themselves. Some reflections showed fear, others mockery. The air crackled with whispers that echoed off the polished surfaces, weaving a tapestry of doubts and terrors. "Are we safe?" Emily's voice trembled, pulling Sarah back to focus. "I don't know," she murmured, heart pounding as fragments of themselves stared back, twisting their expressions into grotesque masks of fear. Then she noticed something, a figure lurking in the corner of one mirrored surface. It was dark, just like the things that chased them, shifting in and out of sight. Panic surged through her veins. Emily stayed close. They took a few cautious steps forward. Mirrors surrounded them, and the reflections multiplied, each one a vulnerability laid bare. The whispers grew louder, rising to an unbearable cacophony, a mix of pleading and taunting. "Help us, leave us, join us." The voices slithered into her mind, burrowing and twisting like worms. Sarah pressed her palms to her ears, trying to drown out the nightmare, but it only intensified. "Emily, we have to get out of here." The urgency in her voice sliced through the fog of dread. In that moment, she locked eyes with her daughter, the light in Emily's eyes flickering like a candle caught in a gust of wind. A loud crack echoed through the hall, and she turned to see a mirror shatter, shards glinting dangerously as they cascaded down. The figure from before surged forward, its presence looming larger than life. "Mommy! What is it?" "I don't know." "Just run." They bolted, feet pounding against the ground, desperately seeking an exit. Each mirror they passed showed them what lay inside their fears, horrors crafted from the darkness of their thoughts. Shadows chased them from behind, fingers clawing at their backs. But then a flicker of something caught Sarah's eye, a door, barely visible through the haze, glowing faintly at the end of the corridor. Hope ignited within her, beating out the buzzing fear. "Emily! Over there!" They dashed toward it, the cries of the shadows behind them morphing into shrieks of rage. The door stood ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the darkened hall. Keep going. As they reached for the door, a powerful force shoved them both back. The darkness coiled around them, forcing them to the ground. Sarah screamed, the air thickening with despair. The whispers turned vicious, clawing at their minds. No! With one final surge of strength, she pushed against the crushing darkness, shoving Emily out of the way as the shadows lunged again. It felt like time itself was ripping, unraveling at the seams. The light beyond the door pulsed, anger and fear surged through her veins, and in that moment of sheer desperation, she lunged forward, breath hitching as the darkness clutched desperately at their heels. But would salvation await them beyond the door, or had they only condemned themselves to a deeper nightmare? As the darkness crashed down, everything erupted into chaos, leaving them gasping, struggling for breath, caught on the edge of oblivion. And then, silence. What lay on the other side of the door? Who would be waiting? The stillness engulfed them, a blanket of quiet that felt wrong. Sarah's heart was pounding, hammering against her ribs like a frantic prisoner. She blinked, trying to gather her senses. Light poured in through the open door, illuminating a room that seemed impossibly calm after the storm of shadows they had just escaped. "Where are we?" Emily whispered, her voice small and fragile. "I don't know." The words escaped Sarah's lips like a confession. The room held an eerie brightness, but the walls glistened with an unnatural sheen, almost pulsating with energy. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing like thunder. Sarah spun around, adrenaline flooding her system. The door had vanished, leaving only a seamless wall. "Mommy!" Panic surged in Emily's voice. "Shh, it's okay. We'll find a way out." Sarah crouched down, squeezing her daughter's shoulders reassuringly. They were alone. Or so it seemed. A sound made her freeze, a soft rustling, like whispers carried on the wind. "Emily, stay close to me," she commanded, feeling the unease creep up her spine. Ahead, the room stretched into a wide expanse with swirling patterns on the floor that looked alive, twisting and turning like snakes. She could only take small steps, one foot in front of the other, trying to navigate this anomaly. Each step she took felt charged. The floor thrummed, connecting with her bones, as if it wanted to share its unsettling secrets. The whispers grew louder, surrounding them, forming a dissonant chorus. "Turn back, forfeit your souls, join us, you do not belong." "Mommy, I'm scared," Emily whimpered, burying her face against Sarah's leg. "Just a little further. We'll be okay," although she didn't believe it herself. Then, from the shadows beyond the walls came shapes, figures moving, gliding swiftly between the faintly bending light. They were shadows, but more solid. Pale faces stared out with hollow eyes, mouths frozen in silent screams. "Help us," a voice croaked. "You must help us. Who are you?" Sarah's voice cracked as she felt the ground shift under her. "What do you want?" "Join us," the figures reached out, fingers curling like roots, seeking nourishment. Sarah tightened her grip on Emily and took a step back. "No! We don't want anything from you." Suddenly, the walls trembled, and the figures grew more erratic, their mouths opening wider. But the sounds that came forth were deafening, a cacophony ripping through her mind. She stumbled, pressing her palms against her ears, trying to block them out. But it was relentless, crawling into her thoughts, dredging up fears she thought she'd buried. "Mommy! Please!" Emily cried, her small voice cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. "Hold on, baby." Sarah tried to steady herself, searching for any sign of an exit, any glimmer of hope. Then she noticed a mirror at the far end of the room, a cracked piece looking out of place. It seemed to hum softly, an undertone of promise in the middle of the dissonance. "Emily, we need to go there. It might be our chance." As they moved toward the mirror, the figures surged, their hunger manifesting into rage. "You cannot escape." They howled as the whispers turned to howls. The air thickened, swirling with desperation and despair. They pushed forward through the tumult, the pounding of their hearts synchronizing with the chaos. Just as they reached the mirror, the figures lunged, their shadows stretching, reaching for them. "Jump!" Sarah shouted, grasping Emily's hand tightly. They leaped toward the mirror just as it shimmered, reflecting their terrified faces. Time slowed, and the shadows collided with them. Darkness engulfed them once more, but in that split second, a piercing light shot through the cracks of reality. And then, nothing. Were they safe? Or had they crossed into a darker realm of horror? One question lingered, echoing in the silence that followed. What had they really become in their desperate attempt to survive? A crushing silence wrapped around them like a heavy fog. Sarah could hardly breathe. She opened her eyes, fully expecting to see walls of an otherworldly prison, but instead, they stood in an open field, bathed in the harsh light of an unrelenting sun. The air felt so normal, so vibrant, but something deep inside twisted with an unsettling dread. "Mommy?" Emily's voice broke the tense silence. She looked around, wide-eyed and bewildered. "Where are we?" "I'm not sure," Sarah replied, glancing in every direction, anxiety gnawing at her stomach. It looked like a meadow, lush green grass swaying gently in a phantom breeze. But the beauty felt wrong, a picture-perfect scene wearing the mask of normality. A sense of urgency gripped her. They had escaped the horrors. Hadn't they? But unease whispered in her ears, casting shadows over the brightness. "We need to find a way back," she said, the words tasting bitter like ash. Just then, the tranquility shattered. A low growl echoed, reverberating through the ground beneath her feet. Sarah turned sharply, her heart racing as dark clouds rolled in, churning above them like a tempest waiting to unleash hell. "Mommy, I can hear them!" Emily clung to her leg, her small body trembling. "Who, sweetheart?" Those voices like back there. Emily's voice quivered, pointing into the distance, where the grass rippled unnaturally, like it was alive. In that moment, Sarah felt it too, a sinister pull, urging her closer. She shook her head, trying to think straight. "We need to go, now." Grabbing Emily's hand, she ran. Each step was heavy, as if the ground sucked at their feet, attempting to drag them back into the depths of whatever nightmare they had escaped. The growls grew louder, morphing into chilling laughter. The air thickened with dread. Suddenly, the earth beneath them shuddered. A fissure split open, a gray abyss yawning wide, spewing forth tendrils of shadow that writhed like serpents. Panic surged inside Sarah. She stumbled back, clutching Emily tighter against her. "Run!" she screamed, desperate to escape the clutches of the unseen horrors creeping from the crevice. They darted forward, propelled by fear, but the shadows were alive. They twisted through the meadow, dark fingers reaching, yearning. Whispers slithered in the wind, coaxing secrets from buried corners of Sarah's mind. "What do you want?" Sarah yelled, the sound torn from her throat. "Come back. Join us," the voices answered, sweet and sinister, echoing in her ears. She felt the weight of temptation and fear. The very ground beneath her feet glowed faintly, as if drawing on their terror, feeding on their hesitation. As they sprinted, a blinding flash of light burst from the fissure. Sarah shielded Emily's eyes, but she could see the shapes forming, twisted reflections of the figures they'd seen before, emerging, hungry and desperate. They were back, no longer confined by walls and shadows. "Mommy, I feel sick," Emily whimpered, her voice cutting through the chaos. The figures lunged closer, jaws snapping, their features a grotesque mockery of her own fear. "Help us! You belong to us!" they screamed, echoing the very turmoil in Sarah's heart. "Stay close." They sprinted towards a distant tree line, hoping against hope that anything awaited them there. The laughter chased them, mocking, growing louder with every step. Would they find safety in the woods? Or was it merely a deeper, darker trap waiting to ensnare them? Caught between the light and the creeping shadows, Sarah's eyes darted to Emily. She felt a desperate need to protect her daughter, but she worried. What if the shadows had already claimed them, and escape was nothing more than a fleeting fantasy? With hope dwindling and shadows closing in, one question remained echoing through the thundering chaos. What price would they have to pay to break free from the grasp of fear? Branches snapped and crackled beneath their hurried footsteps, the forest swallowing them up in darkness. The moment they crossed the threshold, the light dimmed the vibrant meadow, now a distant memory. The air grew colder, suffocating and thick, wrapping around Sarah and Emily like a vice. "Mommy, I can't see." Emily's voice barely rose above a whisper, tinged with rising panic. "Just hold on tight, sweetheart," Sarah urged, her heart pounding louder than the haunting whispers that crawled through the foliage. Each step felt like walking through molasses. Dread clung to her like a shroud. Trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches twisted like skeletal hands reaching for them. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision, warping the trees into monstrous shapes. In the back of her mind, memories of the dark entities they had fought began to resurface, each one tainted by fear and despair. A rustling sound came from behind them, quick and sharp. Sarah spun around, her breath hitching in her throat. But there was nothing, only the oppressive silence, broken only by the erratic heartbeat pounding in her ears. Uncertainty gripped her. The shadows were not behind them, they were all around. "Mommy, I want to go home," Emily whimpered, her small hand trembling in Sarah's. Her heart sank. "So do I, honey. We just need to keep moving." But she felt the weight of panic creeping into her voice. Then the laughter erupted again, coming from the depths of the trees. It was a nightmarish sound, echoing through the grove, swirling around them like smoke. "You can't escape. You've entered our domain." The laughter grew louder, more twisted, almost giddy, as though reveling in their fear. "Run!" Sarah shouted, yanking Emily in the opposite direction, pushing through the dense underbrush. The trees seemed to shift as they moved, forming barriers, directing them deeper into the thicket. "Mommy, I'm scared," Emily cried out, her voice trembling. "I know, baby. Just hold on." The forest pressed in around them. The shadows elongated, gripping the trees like tentacles. Whispers coiled in the chill air, begging her to listen, to give in, to join them. "Join us," the voices intertwined, seductive and melodic, playing on Sarah's deepest fears and insecurities. "You don't have to fight. You belong with us." "No," she shouted, the word tearing at her throat. She stumbled, caught off guard by a vine that coiled around her foot, pulling her down. Emily cried out, yanking away in terror. "Emily, don't let go." She caught a fleeting glimpse of her daughter's terrified face before the shadows surged forward, reaching for Emily, thirsty for the innocence they craved. "Mommy!" Emily screamed, her voice echoing painfully through the stifling air. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah lunged forward, breaking free of the vine's grasp and diving to grab Emily just before the shadows could seize her. "I want to let you take her," she yelled, anger mixing with desperation. "We will not be yours." But another growl rolled through the trees, a sound deeper than any before. A massive form emerged, shadowed by darkness, its eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. It moved with unnatural grace, closing the distance faster than she could fathom. Terror rippled through Sarah as she pushed herself to her feet, clenching Emily's hand tightly. The darkness swirled around them, thickening as she felt the malevolent energy pressing in, attempting to crush their spirits. "Run!" she screamed again, forcing their legs to obey. They sprinted deeper into the trees. Heart racing, Sarah glanced back. The figure stood still, almost ominously watching. Just then, Emily's fingers slipped from her grasp. "Mommy!" Everything froze as dread clawed at Sarah's throat. The shadows erupted around them, howling, reveling in chaos. Time stretched, cruel and unyielding, as she lunged for her daughter. But Emily was only a few steps away, and the darkness was closing in. That moment, Sarah realized what if escape meant leaving Emily behind. What choice could a mother make when faced with that dark truth? A single thought echoed in her mind: would you surrender everything to protect her? Before Sarah could respond, the shadows dove forward, and everything went black. What awaited them in that void? Would Sarah have to confront not just the shadows, but the very darkness within herself to save Emily? As silence dominated the void, Sarah's heart raced, thrumming against her rib cage like a trapped bird desperate to escape. It felt as if she was suspended in a dream, or worse, a nightmare that refused to end. Then, out of the darkness, a flicker of light emerged. It grew slowly, illuminating the space around her. Familiar voices began to crawl out of the shadows, soft at first, then layered with urgency. "Mommy! Mommy!" It was Emily's voice, a lifeline cutting through the oppressive gloom. Sarah strained to reach it, feeling around her. "Emily!" she cried, her voice cracking as she lunged forward. Suddenly, reality bent and twisted around her, montage-like memories flooding back. Images of Matt and Emily playing in the backyard, the laughter they shared, and even the warmth of their bedtime stories were sewn together in a patchwork of urgency, fueling the relentless fire within her. "Stay with me. I'm coming, baby." The shadows around her thickened, eager to swallow her whole, but she wasn't afraid anymore. Strength surged through her. She would do anything, face anything to rescue her children, to protect them. The light pulsed again, and suddenly, the world fractured, revealing a tangled forest. The air was electric, crackling with 1,000 whispers. Sarah crawled forward, pushing against a surge of darkness as the shadows clawed at her wrists. Then, she saw her Emily, standing shyly beneath gnarled branches, illuminated by a soft glow. With shaking hands, Sarah reached for Emily, pushing through the darkness. "Emily! Don't move!" Emily's face looked frightened, but she held her ground. "Mommy!" And just like that, by pure instinct, Sarah broke through the barrier of shadows, hands clasping Emily's small fingers. "I have you!" A wave of relief washed over her, but as they embraced, a dark entity loomed just beyond them, embracing its own shadows like a cloak. The figure breathed deeply, eyes shimmering with insatiable hunger, taunting them as they stood huddled together. The air thickened with foreboding, as though the shadows had formed a noose around their hearts. "Join us!" it roared. "No! We're not yours!" Sarah bellowed, feeling her anger rise to a boiling point. Memories of laughter, warmth, and love fueled her defiance. As if propelled by her emotional surge, bright light exploded from their clasped hands, fracturing the creeping dark with every pulse of energy. Sarah looked down and saw the shimmering aura, swirling around Emily and herself, acting as a barrier against the shadows that loomed. The creature faltered, the gluttonous shadows pruned back, faces twisted in anguish. "You cannot fight forever," it hissed, the darkness around it trembling with fury. "You belong to us. Your family is ours." "No! We are free!" Sarah screamed in defiance, with every ounce of strength she possessed. She began to move, pulling Emily forward, retreating into the light. As they ran, the shadows would reach out, trying to snag at their ankles, clawing toward them, but the brilliance surged brighter, as if responding to their hope. "Just a bit further," she urged, feeling Emily's small hand clutch her tightly. With a final push, they broke into the clearing illuminated by a brilliant light. The shadows dissipated like fog in the morning sun, screeching with rage until the last vestiges lost their grip on the fragile light and fled into the abyss. "Mommy?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling but filled with hope, her eyes bright with unspoken questions. "We're safe now, baby." Sarah held Emily close, staring at the radiant glow around them. They had crossed into a realm of brightness, unlike anything they'd known before. "Where are we?" she asked, glancing around. "We are wherever love is." With that, the landscape shifted and morphed, revealing a whimsical forest painted in vibrant colors, where the trees danced and the air shimmered with warmth. The shadows were gone, replaced by light, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, a profound sense of peace washed over her. Yet Sarah knew, deep down, the shadows had left a mark on their souls. They would never forget the pulse of fear that had tied them together. Turning to where the light grew, where laughter hovered like butterflies in the air, Sarah whispered, "Let us go find your brother." And together, hand in hand, they stepped forward into this new world, embracing hope over darkness. You need to subscribe now to catch every part of this incredible journey, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, and flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about how Sarah and Emily's story unfolds. This is the moment to show your support and be part of our growing community.